Okay, everybody, welcome back. Kids in the back. Thank you. Great little coffee break. So I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Lynne Kelly. Dr. Lynn's going to be talking to us today about orality mnemonic and how that functions in the world of cultural astronomy. Lynne has a very, like many of us, a very interesting interdisciplinary background, earning degrees in engineering, computing, education, and a very interdisciplinary PhD later on in life that has really revolutionized how we learn about and understand orality and memory. So, Lynne?
Thank you, Dwayne. Is this working? I assume it is. If it isn't, bad luck. Okay. Let me check where, that return. Now it works. Right. I'm going to start by saying you've got to think very carefully about the language that's used when you're describing anything archaeological, indigenous, or anything else. For example, the word illiterate changed my life. I was at Stonehenge with no interest in archaeology much at that time. And I picked up a book after I went round and listened to the talk and heard nothing about knowledge systems. I picked up a book by the first book I could find by a bona fide archaeologist, Aubrey Burl, on Stonehenge. Happened to flick to page, I think it's 83, because this moment in my life is etched there forever. And there was the word saying British Neolithic Brits were illiterate. They were not illiterate. Illiterate means don't read or write in a culture which has literacy. Now, this is not Burl's fault. This is the way it was there. It meant that he had not engaged with the research, and there wasn't good reason why he should have, on primary orality, which was very big, the way oral cultures learn. So that word makes a big difference because the illiterate people in a literate culture do not have power, and knowledge is all about power. So much more common is non-literate. I would not like to describe Aboriginal cultures as non-literate, but they are. Non-literate is like describing you as non-avian because you can't fly. It's not about what you can't do, it's about what you can do. And oral cultures, like Australian Aboriginal and all around the world, have a whole suite of abilities to learn and know that the most powerful people have, because they don't have writing, therefore they have an alternative. And that's the alternative that I'm going to be talking about. And what's really important is you're all encoded biologically to use this alternative, and we don't. So all of your potential to learn is way higher than you are probably aware of, which is good. So let's think about the word temple. Research came out a few days ago, it hit the news, that the Maltese temples were possibly used for teaching navigation, for navigation school. In the Pacific, we have buildings that are used as navigation schools. They have ritual objects, they have performance spaces, all the things I'll talk about. They teach, but they're called schools. So if you in your head get told something, Göbekli Tepe is a temple, your brain then adds a whole lot of stuff to it that may not be appropriate. Passage tomb or passage cairn. I'm going to argue that the tombs weren't primarily tombs. That doesn't mean they didn't have some bodies interred in them or parts of bodies. But if you're told it's a tomb, you immediately think that way. Ritual space, sacred space, ceremonial space, or gathering place. In Australia, we tend to use the terms gathering place. In a lot of archaeological contexts, they'll use ritual space. a ritual is a repeated event, something that's repeated over and over. That's all you can assume from the word ritual. Ritual objects, most of them are called enigmatic decorated objects, and I'm going to try and convince you that they are all mnemonic devices. All is probably an exaggeration there, but it doesn't mean I won't exaggerate. Religious, spiritual, animism is something I'm starting working on at the moment, another dichotomy. Animism is a belief, so the dictionaries say, that something has biological life or animate life when it's what we call inanimate, a rock or a stone. Now, I use these Indigenous methods quite a lot, and that dichotomy no longer exists. I have stones that have so much embedded in them, as my main Indigenous colleague, Margot Nogwa, Neil, I've only written 2 books with her, talks about singing up country, calling it to life. Country, rocks, stones, trees have a different life if you've put a knowledge base into them. And so I don't believe, I think when we use the word animism, we think snigger, snigger, they think that rock's alive. It's not biologically alive, but it's also not totally inanimate. So these are the language things that are concerning me. So what we're going to try and do.
Sorry, I got to share with the people on the screen. Sorry, go on. Apologies.
They're there. Dwayne just wanted to give me a chance to have a sip.
That's what it is.
Right, so what we're going, do I go on now?
Make your sound. No.
I want you to get inside the head of an Indigenous elder. And instead of me being vague about Indigenous elders, let's have 2 in your head, Auntie Bridget and Uncle Gilla. It was really interesting when I presented the first time right at the beginning on songlines, which of course I'll get into much more. With Auntie Bridget, I was a nervous wreck up on the Coolum, up northern Queensland. And Auntie Bridget was talking about songlines, and then I started all this memory stuff. And she turned to me in tears and said, pointed to me, then pointed to the audience, said, she gets it, she really gets it. And a member of the audience said to her, but Auntie Bridget, you've never talked this way before. And she said, I thought it was obvious. And a goody man said to me, well, you explain how your knowledge system works. Off you go. How does your knowledge system work? Where the hell do you start? It's because I am glimpsing it superficially that I am capable of making these rash generalizations that are not rash. So let's get inside the head of fully initiated elder, Uncle Gilla or Auntie Bridget. They have a classification of the birds of their area, probably 300 or 400 of them. How many of you can do? I can do the 400 locally now, only because I use these methods. How many of you can do your local 400 birds? Add to that the mammals, and mammals, we're not just talking the kangaroos and wallabies, we are talking the bush rats and all the mice and all the rest of them as well. So you're talking another 100 or something species. The freshwater, the amphibians, the marine life, and if it's up on areas, some have marine and freshwater species. All those species, we're talking 1,000 or so, are in memory able to identify the purposes, their behaviour. Add in the insects and spiders. These research are very hard to come by, but one that's dealt with is by the Navajo, where they identified 701 insects, the elders, working with zoologists and with linguists. You have to have the team of the lot. Plus, we'll talk about restricted knowledge in a moment, but the fact that some of the knowledge is restricted, so you've got all sorts of cultural issues too. 700 invertebrates were identified. I don't know how you are on your invertebrates. I'm not bad on spiders. 700 by the elders. Don't forget, this is all stored in memory, no writing. Not non-literate, oral. Add in the plants and their uses. You'll have specialists, medical specialists, and their use and the way to manage the environment and land as well. All in memory. Add in the astronomy, which we have a few rather qualified people in this room on this. Indigenous astronomy, we might talk later about an argument Dwayne had that he probably doesn't even remember that he had with an astronomer when we first met, and the astronomer saying, but they didn't have telescopes, so they won't know anywhere near as much as me. And Dwayne started on about the relationship between scintillation and weather. The astronomer had made all the links that are integrated in Indigenous knowledges. Genealogies, Jan van Siemer, who worked mostly on African Indigenous people, described Indigenous genealogies as the most complex data set known. I still haven't got my head around them. I work a fair bit with Tyson Yunkaporta, who described them to me as a relational database. So every genealogy is you at the center, and every single person, not just biological relatives, every single person, animal, place, tree, all related and related to each other. It's incredibly complex. So I gave up on that. Freud said just over 100 years ago that the Australian Aboriginal people are close to animals. They lack all moral and ethics and all. Absolutely slamming. That's in Totem and Taboo, page 2. And that sort of view dominated for a long time. As you will all know, ethics and laws and everything are absolutely critical to Indigenous cultures. And all this stuff is integrated. And that is a massive, massive difference from the way our education works now. They do not have, there's some specialists, but the knowledge is still integrated. All that's in memory. How are you at managing all of that? And then we get, we're going to get to country and things soon. Right at the beginning of me doing this research, Nungarai, who's Warlpiri, said to me, and Americans here, that apparently Americans get offended when I say this, so that the elders were pragmatic old buggers. We wouldn't have survived if they weren't. Yet so often you get Indigenous cultures and archaeological sites described in terms of gods. Have you ever heard an Indigenous person at sort of Australian Aboriginal type talking gods? I work very closely, as you'll meet him soon, with an elder from Southeast Alaska. That's not gods. It's completely different concept, the ancestors or old people. But the knowledge system is pragmatic. They survived. So that's when I wrote Knowledge and Power in Prehistoric Societies, which is published by Cambridge University Press as Archaeology and peer-reviewed to glory. So I'm legitimate. Okay, how is this stuff? The other one is for real people, the memory code. And Dwayne asked me to talk about the memory code, not knowledge and power, because you're real people. Everything's got a song. So how is so much information memorized? Song, just as Clive was saying just before, songs you learned when you were very young or even recently will stick in your head. The way what I'm saying now without singing it, and for your sake I won't, is not as memorable. But look, my screen's not there. Look at what Eileen McDinney, who's Yanua, listed as what has a song. She said plants, birds, animals, people, everything. She's not talking woo-woo stuff. She's talking pragmatic information, vast amounts of it stored in song. One study showed that 70% of the songs at a corroboree gathering whatever ceremonial, whatever you want to call a corroboree, a link to knowledge of animals, plants, and astronomy and tides. 70% pragmatic. They also do relationships, love, death, all that sort of stuff as well. But the common factor is science. So I focus entirely on our commonalities. Too often the focus is on our difference because that makes it all exotic and weird and other. Biologically, we're not other. So music is a memory device. Musical instruments in the archaeological record are memory devices. This is me taking an extreme view, and there's more to music than in the memory code in my recent work, showing that humans are the only ones who entrain, link our music. And if any of you are in choirs or bands or orchestras or anything, that forms a tribal link. My daughter, who's a musician, talks about when she's with the musicians, she's with her tribe. There is a bonding that comes. Music is absolutely critical. We are the only species on the planet, although we have evidence Neanderthals use music as well, but we are the only species that entrains our music. I can go in length on birds and whales and things, but I won't at the moment. If you add dance, movement, performance to that music, it then becomes more memorable again. And so you've just enhanced the song, which is why every Indigenous culture the world over dances their knowledge. How many of your lecturers have got up and danced the knowledge? It works a treat. So performance spaces are knowledge spaces. They're memory spaces. They enhance pragmatic information. And in all cultures I've studied, which is an awful lot of them around the world, there are both public and restricted performance spaces. So in Australian parlance, corroboree grounds and Bora grounds, Bora being restricted. And commonly it's said, why don't they just tell us everything? Why do they keep secrets? Why is there secret men's business, secret women's business? They would not have anywhere near the robust information that we have if there were not restricted knowledge. It's absolutely critical. And this has put the elders in a really difficult position at the moment, because if information is shared that's supposed to be restricted apart from cultural taboos, it's really, really against everything the cultures stand for, and I'll explain why in a moment. But if they don't, it could be lost. It is a horrible position to be in, and as a non-Indigenous person, I can't advise anything. Why is it restricted? Think of what in Australia is called the Chinese whispers. In America is called the telephone game. I don't know what it is in England. Chinese whispers. Nothing to do with the Chinese, apparently. No. Anyway, culturally inappropriate, so I didn't say Chinese whispers. I did an experiment on the TV, First Inventors, with Rob Collins, the Indigenous presenter, up in Darwin, 10 people on the beach. Rob had a story that mimicked an Indigenous story, so it was only a few sentences long with a few animals and a few plants in it. He told the first person, around it went, and as you would predict, by the end, the kookaburra had survived and a pineapple had been added to the story. The rest was completely gone. 10 minutes. The producer said to us, sorry, we've got to film that again. Rob then had told them the whole story. I'd waffled on about these stories that date back over 10,000 years, accurately recorded. And the producer says, you've got to do it again. But we can't. We've just told them the story. Do it again. Rob told the same story, got around, the kookaburra survived, and a monkey had been added. That is how easily information is corrupted. If information is not kept restricted and secret business and constantly confirmed by the other elders, you will not have accurate information, absolutely essential for survival when there's a drought, any adverse effect, but also to keep that vast amount of information accurate, you must have restricted information. So you're not expected to read that, by the way. The work of Patrick Nunn, The Edge of Memory, and his new one are talking about knowledge and stories that have been kept over 10,000 years accurately. And these have been confirmed by science. Indigenous people didn't need them confirmed. And these are things like landscape changes, terrestrial changes, all the islands around Queensland, astronomical events, volcanic events. And it's interesting that the volcanoes that erupted before 65,000 years ago, there are no stories about in Indigenous stories, only those since. There's a whole lot of ways of confirming these are accurate recollections encoded in information and stored. And there's now stuff from right around the world. The elder I work with in Southeast Alaska, who's just appeared on the screen. So add David Knosh. He's a Tlingit, T-L-I-N-G-I-T, but he tells me it's Tlingit. It sounds like Klingon. No, Tlingit, elder and storyteller in Southeast Alaska. And I've been comparing the knowledge methods between the two. Somebody in his audience a couple of years ago told him to read the memory code, and he contacted me. The greatest gift I've had, I think. So he has stories that date back to the last ice age. We'll get back to those. But the biggest effect on memory is place. And there's so much research on this, including the 2014 Nobel Prize for Memory went to doctors that showed that place cells in the brain are absolutely critical to memory. And this is where you get understanding of what we call an Australia, country with a capital C. It's called other things all over the world. Landscape is geography. Country is geography with a whole lot of information stuck into it. So the country has come to life. Or as Margot keeps saying to me, we sing up country, and it's completely different from a landscape. It's an animate. The dichotomy doesn't work. So I'll use Aboriginal songlines as my example for Australia, but these are all over the world. Bruce Chatwin, according to Margot, sent me an email a week or so ago saying he wasn't the first to use the term songlines. He used the term songlines, made famous the term songlines, controversial among some Indigenous people because it showed that there was a lot more intellect behind and skills and abilities, but it didn't go anywhere near deep enough on how incredibly complex these things are. So Margot was commissioned to edit the First Knowledges series, which some of you will know, we're up to 6-7 books in it. And we did the opening book on songlines. And songlines exist across the landscape, the seascape, and the skyscape, all interlinked. So this is just a way to imagine it. Simplified. I am grossly oversimplifying because I'm not Indigenous and I haven't lived this way all my life. Let's look at Uluru. And it's described by the traditional owners as Jakurpa. Can you say it loudly and then I won't say it? Thank you very much. Can you say the traditional owner's name too? Or Anangu, but it's not. Anagu. Thank you very much. I apologise. There will be mispronunciations right through. Please correct me throughout. But notice that it's described as whispering the connections between people, plants, animals, and the land. It is pragmatic in a big way, as well as having a whole lot of spiritual connections. I am acknowledging now that there are spiritual connections. I am acknowledging also I have no right to talk about them, nor for what I'm talking about do I need to, but they must be acknowledged. So if you imagine the 10 kilometres around the base of Uluru, every one of those little dints and places all the way around has story, ceremony, song, dance, associated knowledge. So it is a knowledge thing. As you go higher up, you end up at restricted knowledge. And that's why it is completely inappropriate for anybody who is not initiated with permission to climb Uluru and should never have done so. That restricted knowledge is essential. But so if you imagine being trained from childhood in the stories, and then each story gets layer upon layer upon layer of complexity. And we're going to play with that idea in a moment. These methods of associating information with place, the way your brain is encoded to do it, can be found all over the world. The Native American trails of the Southwest, the Pueblo are probably the culture that outside Australia that have been hugely beneficial to my research, and their astronomy is extraordinary. And now I'm working with Tlingit, Haida and Tsimshian in Southeast America, Southeast Alaska. The ceremonial roads in the Pacific. But if you analyze the Inca system of, is there anyone Spanish here? Can you say secas or Seca? Thank you. In Peru, these work the same way. There's about 300 shrines. See, that word is immediately implied a religious connotation. It may have a spiritual, but pragmatic information was stored in it. So right around Cusco, but some of those are not physical roads. They're virtual. They're known. They were documented by the Spanish and then destroyed. Don't even start me on what the Spanish did around there. And you've got Machu Picchu, but you've also got a memory device called the Kipu, sometimes spelt other ways. And I've read in archaeological reports that Indigenous people didn't use memory devices. We know this because the only one anyone ever mentions is the Kipu. That's because if you look up memory devices, Indigenous memory, apart from the fact you'll hit my stuff, you probably won't get anything. So let's go on and have a look, because we'll come back to that in big time. So a very simplified version of songlines is the memory palace. And that's what all memory champions use today. And I'm Australia's senior memory champion. Senior meaning old, over 60. There's not a lot of us competing in that. I don't compete anymore. But it's a matter of memorizing shuffle decks of cards and numbers and things, totally useless stuff under time pressure, which is not what Indigenous cultures do, because they memorize useful stuff for long term. But it's a way to understand it. I was trained by Dominic O'Brien, the 8 times world memory champion in Britain. It didn't train me over there. It's a long story. But he coined the term memory journey without realizing that he hadn't invented it. He now knows that. Obviously, he came across the Greeks and their method of loci. And of course, he didn't know about Aboriginal songlines. So let's give this a try. We're going to put in, got plenty of time, haven't we? Going to put in the first 10 countries of the world in population order into this room. So we're going to do it, and remind me at the end, Dwayne, to check that they remembered them. So the most populous country in the world, anyone tell me? India's just taken over. So in my brain, it's China. So in my songline at home that goes China, India, I've had to add now another layer to the story that they've swapped. So we're going to start with this door. You make your own association with India. What do you personally associate most with India? Indian song and dance, right? Anyone else got anything? Associate that with India. Nice. Yeah, gorgeous textiles. Yeah. That's exactly the method used a lot. There is another assumption out there that Indigenous people don't have a sense of humour. They are always portrayed on TV or anywhere else deadly serious, often standing on one leg with a spear, but without a sense of humour. If you have anything to do with Indigenous people, that will disappear instantly. The first elder I talked to about this stuff, I'd been told by white people that know lots about Indigenous culture that I mustn't mention science because science is a Western concept. So I met my first elder and he said, what are you working on? I said, yeah. And I was trying to avoid the fact that I'm working on the way science is encoded in Indigenous culture. He just said, oh, out with it, woman. I got used to that. I'm going to talk about science being encoded in. Oh, we've been trying to tell you that for centuries. Yeah. That bluntness and humour is absolutely typical. And yet it's not the way Indigenous cultures are portrayed. To get back to this, India, have you all got India in there somehow? Okay, we're going to do China on that board. I've got a menu for a Chinese restaurant, which is why your method indoors is they use metaphor and puns and things all the time. That's not us clever Western lot. India, China. Oh, Great Wall of China. Okay, there's photographs over there behind my menu or in front of it. Anything else you could smash? Anyone got some China I could smash against it? Anyway, so have you all got China in? Number 3. US, very good. So let's go to that far corner. There's Donald Trump and he's just got his bill through. Congratulations, Donald. Just ruined everything. Oh, sorry if I've offended anyone. Can you all see Donald Trump over there, his hair shining in that sun? Oh, out. You want him outside?
Outside the tree, yeah.
Out.
Great thing for you.
Right, number 4. Any guesses? Indonesia. Oh, we can't do your in it anymore. Okay, let's go to that pillar. How have you got Indonesia over there? Oh, right. Do you want to go and stand there? Yes. Because action and movement and things make it more memorable. If you would please go and represent Indonesia. No, but you've got to stand in front of the pillar because that's where we put Indonesia. Okay, we all got Indonesia at the pillar. That one's going to be easier for everyone because we've now engaged with a person. Thank you very much. Right. So you want me to not give you more examples? Yeah, you're absolutely right. Thank you very much. After Indonesia, we're up to number 5. These 2 have changed places too from mine. So number 5. No, Vietnam is down in my scale of around 11 or 12. Pakistan. Somebody knows their countries really well. Pakistan. Okay, let's take the view out that direction and please put in what you associate with Pakistan. We're not allowed to say anymore because we're making other people think different things. Can you just do a quick review? Okay, next. We've now got to Africa. Nigeria. Okay, so what will we do for Nigeria? Let's go up to the roof. Okay, so we're not allowed to suggest anymore. Nigeria up on the roof. You might use Niger as something, but there's another country called Niger. That's all. But Nigeria. You all got something in there? The next one. Is the genius going to get the next one? Unless people have been to my talks before. Can you guess number 8, the next one?
Brazil.
Oh, I forgot Brazil. You're right. I've left Brazil out. It's before Nigeria. Okay, we're going to whack it there. They're all approximate anyway. Thank you very much. So over in that corner, we've got Brazil. Have you all got a link to Brazil? Yeah, that's exactly what I would do. And it's interesting, Brazil at the moment I can't move it, even though it's moved with Pakistan, because I've got it number 5 and my memory palace stacks a whole lot of things. And I've got the periodic table there. And so I've got neon there as well. And it's, no, I haven't. I've got boron. I shouldn't have neon in the wrong place. I've got boron there, and I've got the Rio for Brazil, and I've got a guy stepping out in a grey suit looking terribly boring, giving me boron, but saying to me, Rio is not the capital of Brazil, be careful, it's Brazil. You know. So you start layering upon layer to get more and more information in. Brazil, okay, here at this interesting little location, we're up to number 8. Any big guesses? I think we'll stop at 8. Yes. It's cheating.
What do you return memory cards? I'm autistic. I associate data with all sorts of sensory.
Oh, don't start me on autism and the knowledge gene and neurodiversity. Ask me at the end why evolution proves we have got to have autistic people. And you have just had an example of why Indigenous cultures don't see them as disordered. You have got to have, you told me not to sidetrack onto this, but I'm going to anyway. You have to have autistic people. Remember I said information is kept accurate over 10,000 years or more. Without people repeating and focusing on detail and not liking change, you will not get that. But these are performance-based knowledge systems. Without people performing and bringing in lots and being interested in everything, you will not get the ability to adapt to new information, and you won't get it highly memorable. You must have ADHD, you must have autism, you must have dyslexia. Dyslexics are very strong spatially in terms of building and constructing things. Architects, a huge percentage of architects can't spell. And navigation and so on. I have aphantasia. I have no visual imagery. Why on earth would evolution make 4% of the population have no visual imagery and crap memories? Because we also can't relive the past. So we don't get post-traumatic stress. So our mobs had some traumatic event, which happened with my father's death, we will recover much faster than most people who can relive trauma. So evolution has carefully put all the neurodiversities in, and our education system has carefully turned them into disorders. Right, we'll only go to 8. This is Bangladesh. When my granddaughter wanted to put in, she's about 5, Bangladesh, she went to the cupboard, she was a 5-year-old, grabbed my saucepan lids, fortunately not the china dishes, and banged them mad so that she had Bangladesh. Can you do a quick round in your head? Make sure you've got them all. What you did was also put in story starters. Donald Trump over there is a story starter. He is a character. You can do what you like to him in order to add. Yes, but that's the way the stories work. They're violent, they're beautiful, they're extreme, because that makes information memorable. So take your memory palace and now make it thousands of locations and layer upon layer upon layer of information. And so we have songlines such as the Seven Sisters songline, which the big exhibition that Margot curated. Right across the country, the story varies as you elaborates and changes, as is appropriate for which part of the country it's relevant to, and ends up with Orion's belt and the Pleiades star cluster. I called it a constellation in front of Dwayne. Okay, so now you've got that memory palace. This is what you add to it in order to make it a songline. You add songs. So you just made, we will sing about Donald Trump now. Layers upon layers of information. Mythological characters. Be very careful about mythology. It's another dichotomy. Is it fiction? Is it non-fiction? That's how our libraries are divided up. It is neither. It's different completely. We'll talk about it more. Stories with very vivid imagery, as people are acting out about Donald Trump. Music and rhythm. Rhythm and music add so much to memorability. Dance, rhyme, repetition, conceptual metaphors that I won't go into at length, but are absolutely critical. For example, if I said to most people in Western culture, he met his Waterloo, it would mean something. To a lot of other people, it means nothing. So for the Pele people in Africa, they talk about, oh, he's an armadillo. Means nothing to me, but it saves them saying, oh, it's somebody who talks when they shouldn't talk, because armadillos curl up, and we've got this story about it curling up, and when it was convinced to uncurl, it could be killed because its secret was revealed. It's easier just to say armadillo. So conceptual metaphors are absolutely critical because they enable oral cultures to store vast amounts of information with less words. Art is absolutely critical to it. I'll get back to that, and it's the area that's really got me in the moment. Mnemonic objects, memory aids, sometimes known as enigmatic ritual objects, and community and social interactions. I think I started talking about Tyson Yunker Porter and got sidetracked, which is common. My largest memory palace is 5 kilometers for Chinese, because I decide what is the hardest thing I can possibly imagine to learn, especially with aphantasia and no visual imagery, and it was Chinese. So I've set up this memory. Without these methods, there was no hope. I failed French at school. Can you imagine how I'd go on Chinese? So I get to one location and I'm trying to put the word in for love. I, that's the tone. I can't do it without giving you the tone. I. And I get there and I'm standing in front of the house with the character and trying to memorize all. And the woman comes out, you know, why are you staring at my house? I'm not casing the joint, I'm doing Chinese. So I've learned that I just say what I'm doing. She said, love, oh, I love orchids. And off she goes about her love of orchids. This house, which is fairly ordinary, now has Anna in front of it talking about orchids. I've got a story starter. I've got a character. I can create Anna in any way I like. And all the other words that are associated with that house, of which there are hundreds, will all fit in with that story. So those community and social interactions are really valuable in learning. So let's start looking at objects. These are Churinga or Churinga restricted objects. I would not show a photo of one. They're a restricted male object. I have permission from the Aboriginal people I consulted with that these images are not particularly accurate, but they give the idea, and that's all you need, is that these are memory devices. So the elder, and it'll be a male elder in this case, will touch the different positions on it and tell the stories associated. He will tell the stories to whoever's present at the level of initiation. So if they're not an elder, they won't get all the detail in order to keep everything accurate. These are education tools. They are mnemonic devices. So I'm going to pass around a replica of this because it wouldn't be appropriate really to have around the real thing. But this is a Coolamon. Just like hand around, make sure you look at the back. This is a Coolamon that Nungarai gave me at the very beginning of this, and I get emotional every time I hold it. I'm a foundation member of the Australian Skeptics. I am as cold-blooded skeptic as can be until I started engaging with all this stuff. So Nungarai left the room, came back and said, the old people have asked me to give you this. And it's got a whole lot of carvings on it. Each one would be a girl's device. There are no people left in the Central Desert community with this knowledge, which is heartbreaking. And as the girl carried it with her, she would learn the songs associated with each of those markings and then layer upon layer of information associated with it. My first reaction when I came across this concept was, yeah, good. By the time I got to this, I had no doubts how effective this would be. But it first came across. Oh, no, we'll do some American ones first. Winnebago, now the Ho Chunk. Memory board at the bottom. Pointing to the screen's useful, isn't it? Memory board at the bottom. Birch bark scrolls. Any Americans can tell me how to pronounce Ojibwa. Ojibwa. Thank you. Ojibwa birch bark scrolls, which I studied those photographs museum in America. Absolutely extraordinary, the amount of information stored, but I'm not going to go on and on because I will. Did I bring, yeah. This is not really, this is Lone Dog's winter count. That's not Lone Dog's winter count, that's me doing one for every year since 1900. But the way this works is that from the middle, every time at the winter count, first snow of the year, the elders, the knowledge keepers will decide what was the most significant event of the year, get it represented, and that gives you a clue into everything else that happened in that year and to all the stories. And it's added each year. So the first one in the middle was when 21 people were killed by the Sioux. This is Dakota. So these memory devices are everywhere, and the implications for the archaeological record are huge. Are we going to get to, yes, Lukasa. So the first one I came across was the African Lukasa. There are none of these in Australia. I have seen a photo that I should not have seen of an Aboriginal man using a chiringa sitting in the same position, touching exactly the same way, but it works beautifully. Now, when I first was told about how the massive amount of information that could be encoded to a Lukasa, I didn't believe it. I mean, let's face it, it's a bit of wood with beads and carvings. This is a copy. There are none in Australia. I've seen them held one, getting very emotional, at the Brooklyn Museum. There's a few at museums around the world, none in Australia that I know of. This is a replica to physically what it's like, but adjusted to be a memory code for me because it works so much better than the first one I did. So it's held like that. You'll feel it's perfect. It's all scaled and everything. It's tactile galore. They use the back, which is representing tortoiseshells. And if you hold it and try it, you will find that every point is different. It's encoding the history of writing, but that's not what matters. What matters is what it's physically like to hold and how brilliantly it will work as a memory system. So I first read about this and decide, yeah, frankly, don't believe a word of it. This is just, you know, how we like to make Indigenous culture sound good because it's fashionable. So I went and got a bit of wood. This is my worst scientific method. Bit of wood. They were building our veranda at the time. Glued some beads on randomly and thought, what do I want to encode? Oh, my husband's a birder. Have we got any birders present that can check my stuff? Good. I'll encode, let's put it up the right way. I'll encode the 412 birds of Victoria. No,
I don't know. Right.
No, it's a concept. You know what pelagic is? That'll do. And I started encoding. And with the names, so starting with Dromaeodae, I'm not doing the 82 families, 400 whatever birds. Dromaeodae, they're all a day, so I don't have to remember that. Drum roll for the start. Dromaeodae is the emu. The bead fell off because I'm crap at craft, and it's really sharp to touch, but that's fine because the emu's sharp beak. Next one is the ducks, Anatidae, 16 of them. I'm going to hand this round. There's some already fallen off, but that just makes it more memorable. Oh, I will mention before I do I got to there, you'll notice there's some glue down the side. I've warned you I was crap at craft. And that's the lyrebird, Menuridae. How do I get that in? Well, a man has urinated on my Lucasa and then he lied about it. I now have Menuridae and I have lyrebird. And you're all laughing. Humour, vulgarity makes it memorable. So, Anatidae, the ducks, there's the swan, and there's the magpie goose. So that immediately suggested a footy match between the swans and the magpies. I've got the musk duck wearing his musk cologne over in the bushes. We won't go further there. Got the hardhead bashing people up. We've got the teals, the chestnut and the grey teal are the tea ladies coming up in half time. You can get a story out of the lot, and I've memorised them in taxonomic order. It works unbelievably. So I had to say, you can be a skeptic, but boy, does this work. So that's that one. Haku there was 4 at the time, building his little one about wattles, but I won't go on. Dwayne does, thank you for sending me those photos. Dwayne does this every year for the 88 constellations, which don't include. And those students, there's one there. Right. What is amazing every year, I've done this, little kids, old people, and these students, is that it goes silent. I put out stacks of beads, they get their board as they choose what works for each one. That process is incredibly valuable. And all those students had exactly the same set of beads to choose from, the same set of data to encode. And they all turned out differently. Really amusing. One day, if you ever remember the name of the guy, said to us at the beginning, 88 constellations, we've got to reel all these off and tell you about it in our assessment. That's impossible. You remember him saying this last time? About 10 minutes in, he's building his Lucasa and saying, this is getting easier. Gee, it'd be easy if we were allowed to use our Lucasa. Dwayne said, yeah, you can use that when you're doing it. That's too easy. In 10 minutes, he realised. And did you find it worked a treat? Unbelievable. So now we should think in terms of the record, archaeological record. I'm trying to plant things before we get to the archaeology in your brain. Public restricted devices. Now I'm going to plant totem poles. Dave's back again. This is the loon pole. And now we need the birder to confirm what I'm saying. We're up in Alaska now, but right across the red-throated loon, Orkney, I've heard them. This bird, they do hunting magic or fishing magic. We should not use the term magic. That implies something near not really real. They sing the song before they go out fishing of the loon. And the loon, its call is piercing and it always returns to land. It is not a pelagic bird. Pelagic birds are ones that go out to sea and stay out there. So if you're out fishing, an unexpected storm comes up, birds are all going berserk. If you've practiced and remembered the call of the red-throated loon, pick that call out and follow it, you will get back to land every time. It saves lives, just as their stories tell you. And the loon pole, the totem pole, tell stories right down. And I'm going to argue that the poles in the British Neolithic American Archaic are totem poles. Stories, there's the loon at the top, Raven will be there, and all the others. And so there's Dave Kanosh singing. This video is available, and that artwork is actually a complete memory aid. So as he's in the video, as he's singing with the dancers, the Tlingit dancers, every now and then he just glances back, and I've got him describing it to me, that he has stories encoded with each of those images. It's not quite as symmetrical as it looks. And he was selecting, watching the time as I am now, which stories he's going to tell. So that's a massive memory board. We have totem poles all over the world. And now I'm going to get to ritual, because I do want to get to archaeology. With rituals, you won't be able to read that, but Alfonso Ortiz wrote about the Tiwa world, which is one of the Pueblo cultures. And he tells you that also read Richard I. Ford, who also writes about corn. Richard I. Ford writes about the way the Pueblo plant corn. Now, they have, umpteen varieties. If they just planted yellow corn as we did and had a bad season, you just starved the entire population. They have 7 varieties. Have I got the? Yes, I have. Multiple varieties. Now, if you've ever grown corn, it cross-pollinates. So they have all sorts of rules and regulations stored in ritual, dance, song, story, on devices that say plant here and here, separate by time, separate by place, how to choose the best kernels, who has responsibility to make sure that happens. And so they have survived. And Richard Ford called his paper on it The Color of Survival. So when you see the Pueblo dancing, they'll often have corn cobs, but they also have these characters called kachina, which some people just call dolls. They are not dolls for playthings, although they can be used that way. They are the characters that are going to be in the stories that the children will learn as they grow older and older. They will learn more and more complexity about every aspect of their culture. So the corn itself, in dolls, in dance, in performance, on objects, they are all linked. So you have the performances in the kiva, which are restricted performance spaces. And now we'll start to hit the archaeology, because Kokopelli is one of these kachina, one of the mythological characters. Are they biological ancestors, or are they purely fictional? And that question is the problem. Why are we trying to separate? They can be either, they can be amalgamation. That's not a question that's relevant. The question causes a problem in our heads. So there's Kokopelli, the humpback flute player in the rock art, a couple of thousand years old, still, and that's a modern one, still made today. He was banned by the American government because he's all about sex and stuff. We can't have anything about sex, can we? The Pueblo kept him going anyway, because they are into sex. And so we get to Chaco Canyon. Chaco is probably, I apologize, Clive, Stonehenge is fine, but Chaco Canyon in the American Southwest is the place that had the most impact on me of anywhere. It was just absolutely awesome. There is a representation of it. Now, if you start looking at it in terms of Indigenous knowledge systems, you have the performance plazas, large and small, depending on which audience they're for. You've got the kivas, hundreds of kiva rooms that were not inhabited. There's no hearths or anything in there. There was a habitation. This Chaco Canyon, this is one of the great houses, Pueblo Bonito. I will waffle on about Chaco Canyon forever because the impact on me was amazing. I was there with an archaeologist, and for some reason, Americans don't like dirt roads. So Chaco Canyon's 14 kilometres dirt road, so there's not many tourists there. So there's Pueblo Bonito as it is now. You have the most incredible brickwork, and you have astronomical alignments, windows at weird angles for astronomical alignments. They've reconstructed a great kiva at Aztec ruins. And here's another where the word causes a problem. It's called Aztec ruins because obviously Indigenous Native Americans wouldn't be smart enough to do this. So the Aztecs must have come and done it, which, as you will be well aware, is a load of crap. The acoustics in that place are extraordinary. The person standing in the middle can whisper and you can hear everything. And the impact, the resonance, and wonderful. Alignment. Now I've had a Zoom call with Anna Sophia. Does anyone know how to pronounce her name? Yeah. Sophia. Anna Sophia. Had a Zoom call with her a couple of weeks ago. This is Chetro Kettle with the full moon. And this is a public location. But let's look at, with the solstice project, with the sun dagger at a highly restricted location. I won't go into all the detail, and I cannot, she tried to teach me to pronounce it. And the next bit? Good, thank you. This is a very useful audience you have here. Oh, I am honoured to have you here. I went to the Indian Cultural Centre, and well, you can see it in photos. Yeah. I can't. The aim gave me an hour and a half, not 15 hours. Sorry, Dwayne.
I just wondered the logo we use for the society.
Right. So Anna has just gone to Stonehenge.
Yeah, I saw her there.
Right. And we were talking about this stuff in terms of Stonehenge. So that's at a highly restricted site. Please disagree with anything I'm saying if you've got a problem. You were this one. Say something wrong. I'm getting worried now. Okay, so let's go over to Cahokia in Illinois. And we are now talking a large community planting. But there they have a circle of poles, which they call Woodhenge, named after the British version, which they keep adjusting. So you'll get the same patterns all over the world because there is one common factor, the human brain. So at Poverty Point, I spent some time at Poverty Point in Louisiana, the biggest mobs of mosquitoes I have ever seen. Mounds, when you're looking at a site, you've got to look at the whole site and the chronology and all the bits and pieces. So they've got what they call PPOs, Poverty Point objects, which are clay balls in different shapes and things. And the only explanation I could get was that they make a difference in the cooking of the fish if it's sort of got dints in it and not got dints in different shapes. Our cultures here have been using clay balls for cooking for an awfully long time, and there is no record that different shapes do different things. There's also miniature ones like this. They look like these and are about the same size, and we'll get to those in a moment. I'm going to argue that they are mnemonic devices. Now what I want you to do, because there's a whole lot of ways they work if you start looking at the Maya, and I haven't got time. So I'm going to a site that I hope most of you have never heard of. How many know about, I know you do. 2 know about Stanton Drew. Good. Okay, 3. Okay, pretend you don't. So Stanton Drew, I want you to start analysing this in terms of what I've just tried to bias you towards. This, I have paid permission to Rupert Soskin for this image. So there we have a site. This is not a photograph. It's a couple of 5,000 years ago, but it's a reconstruction. I want you to try and imagine there are post holes, 2.5 meter intervals, but those posts are 1 meter wide. Can you imagine what it's like in that? Now, all I want you to do is change them into totem poles. And there's a stone circle round it, but that probably came later. There's still debates about things. A flat-bottomed ditch. I'm going to tell you that's incredibly important that it's flat-bottomed. And a bank, and then the village outside. And the only, and an entrance, it's not defensive, flat-bottomed ditch and entrance is not defensive. And we've got 135 meters in diameter. Just take a moment to imagine this site. It must have been so incredibly impressive. Okay, Rupert's explanation in a film that he did in 2010 was that it was probably or possibly used for slaughter, that demonstrations of a forest hunting and slaughtering animals for visual and so on, and the posts must have been shorter than he originally put in. If an Indigenous culture is going to represent a forest, they're not going to do 9 neat, tidy, incredibly well measured out circles. But if you're going to set up a memory palace of any form, it has to be able to be moved in order. If you can find me a stone circle or a timber circle that's randomly arranged, then I'm in trouble. Okay, but what he didn't mention in that is that the archaeological reports also have another small circle on the top of a hill at a distance, carefully flattened and with posts around as well, or stones. I hope every one of your brains just went public and restricted. It goes restricted as in, we've got an avenue, which is really useful. I'll talk about in a moment. As a university, that is incredibly effective design because you've got first layer of totem pole, you get initiated in more and more knowledge built up and a highly restricted site as well. Absolutely fits the pattern beautifully. So in my book, Knowledge and Power, I came up with 10 indicators that are necessary for me to define somewhere as a mnemonic monument, as a knowledge base. You need no indication of individual wealth, so that the barrows and burials with lots of goods and that tend to come a little bit later from the beginning. Pueblo have all sorts of rules to stop an individual, so do Australian Aboriginal Australian, and so did Tlingit. So that is because knowledge is power and we cannot afford to have power in the hands of one people. And I hope you're all over at Trump over there. We must have public and restricted ceremonial sites or we do not have knowledge reliably stored. There must be a large investment of labour for no obvious reason. If you add knowledge into it, suddenly the obvious reason. Knowledge is more important than anything else. There must be a prescribed order or it's not indexed. And in things that are not indexed as knowledge systems, information can be lost. There must be enigmatic decorated objects, which we do have associated. Groovedware in particular, I worked with Dr. Ros Cleal, who's an expert on groovedware, and her 1988 PhD thesis talked about the fact that it's mended beyond its use as a vessel. And I was able to point out that at Chaco Canyon, we've got exactly the same thing with the cylinder jars. You get that all over the world. These objects and the Coolamon, these objects have way more value than just as vessels. An apparent imbalance of trade. And if you look at Poverty Point, Stone, there was no stone there. Stone, turquoise, all macaws, all sorts of things came in, food, labor. Nothing appears to have gone out. If you add knowledge to it, your trade imbalance disappears, because knowledge is so important that people are coming in to Chaco. You've got great houses and little versions and everything. Knowledge is coming, is there. Things come in, knowledge goes out. Astronomical observations, I don't need to tell you how important they are, and calendars, especially, well, for all resources. Monuments that reference the landscape. And what you've got, to look at the chronology, is originally cultures, they were not nomadic. Can we get rid of that word completely? You don't get song lines or knowledge systems working like that if you have nomads, because they're wandering. Australian cultures are either sedentary or mobile, moving between known sites. Mobile cultures, the landscape was originally with the songlines. As they settle, they must reference those landscapes, because they don't suddenly go from hunting, gathering, fishing, whatever, to farming. That knowledge must be brought in, so that monument will reference the landscape. Acoustic enhancement, because performance is so critical, and rock art as mnemonic, because rock arts work that way. Dave Knosh went to Stonehenge at one stage and said to the guide, what were the stories? I want to touch the stones, and what were the stories? And the guide carefully took this American Indian back to the bus, treated him as if he was stupid. The cairns in Southeast Alaska, I can't go to all of it. So when imagining Stonehenge, the beginning, think of the Ring of Brodgar in Orkney, forget the water. Oh, by the way, there was a lot of research that messed me up when I get to ditches, saying that the ditches held water and that was part of it. But the recent research out of Orkney from the woman with the double-barreled name, no, it'll come to me. They didn't hold water. They couldn't hold water. So imagine that. So that's what Stonehenge, my crappy drawings initially, 100 meters across, stones or posts. I don't know if is it still debated? Still debated whether it was the blue stones or the posts, or nothing in the Aubrey holes. Oh, that messes me up. And the ditch in segments, I'm not going to go into all the detail, and then it ended up, it was 500 years. You're going to correct anything, aren't you?
That's okay.
500 years before the Sarsens arrived. So your image of Stonehenge with the big Sarsens is not the beginning. There was originally the cursus, a much bigger object, posts that go back earlier again. So you've got the whole monuments representing as the culture became less and less mobile and more sedentary. Clive's going to talk about station stones and all the other stuff, but it's now a very restricted site. That's me just trying to scale people into it, and I think that middle one's a circle now, not a horseshoe anymore. But it's very restricted. That just gives you the idea. The Sarsens from Marlborough, 25k up the road, the little blue stones from Wales, Foamhenge to replicate it in order to see what it would have looked like, how restricted it would have been, and to check acoustics and the acoustic enhancement. There's a lot of work on. So you've got a public site becoming more and more restricted, which messes me up, except just down the road, same time, we get Durrington Walls, which is massive. I won't go into all the figures about it, with the north and south circle, and just a little bit away from it, you've got Woodhenge, which works, make that totem poles. And there's reports from the archaeologists saying when they walk into it, they feel obliged to follow a particular route. It's not random. Now to get onto the ditches. Why? Did they have flat-bottomed ditches? I'm going to say, and apology once again, Clive, Britain's weather is crap. It's absolutely essential that it's absolutely essential that these gatherings, these performances are performed regularly. Repetition is essential for memory. And as performance sites, these are divine. They can be covered. Can you imagine? No, let me get on to the next one before you start imagining. There's the details on the figures, on sizes. We're talking millions of work hours. Avebury, 3 million work hours has been estimated for the ditch. They did not do that for no reason. We've got astronomical alignment. So what's been built in is all sorts of making sure we can get more. And there's a whole lot more to it than that. But this is clever stuff. Now, we've got stories in Australia going back at least 17,000 years, 10,000 years. We've got them from all over the world recording ice age changes. In the Tlingit have stories about about a stone weir that's 75 metres underground now. These guys had all this information. This is 5,000 years ago. We have two choices. The Brits were thick and everybody else was brighter, or they were storing vast amounts of information too. I think the evidence is pretty clear which of those is true. They are storing lots of information. They are clever dudes. So we need the objects. I'm watching the time. I'll start passing these around. These are carved stone balls that you've probably noticed they would. I can afford to get things carved. But Stonehenge, the plaques, chalk plaques, absolutely have very similar features to many of the objects we know are knowledge objects. Abstract ones allow you to store much more information. If we go to Avebury, where we've got this massive, massive site with public and restricted, and you've got West Kennet, Long Barrow, you've got all sorts of things. I'm hurrying now. So there it is with a village in the middle. You've got the Long Barrow, which I'm going to say is not necessarily a tomb, even though it's not primarily a tomb. It will work really, really well as a restricted performance site. There's my husband, Damien, before he was in the wheelchair. It's a bit upsetting. Next to a stone, massive stone, isn't it? Add in the ditch. That's Gray's excavation. Those little things are actually people, archaeologists in the ditch. And in his reports, he talks about how much effort they made to make that ditch flat-bottomed. So that's how you should be imagining Avebury. Those ditches are in chalk. They are white. They're carrying lights, reflecting lights. They are singing and performing. You're going to have acoustic effects like you wouldn't believe. I am desperate for one of these dug in the backyard. Husband refuses to do it. As a performance site, this would be extraordinary. You've got the avenue, and Nungarai said when you get to Avebury Avenue, make sure you take note of how the stones come in. They should come in so that you're conscious of one stone or one pair of stones at a time, and they should be as different as possible from each other. And she was describing Avebury beautifully. You've got the chalk balls at Windmill Hill, which are much older. And when I was talking to Ros Cleal about this, she got out the stone balls, and they had thought of a lot of the scratchings as they made the balls. But she started to say, yes, she's endorsed the memory code, by the way, authority on Avebury, and that those etchings look like they could have been made deliberately as memory aids, but of course chalk wears more than other things. We've got Stonehenges everywhere. The reason is that not that they've all been to Stonehenge and learnt. They're all different time and place. they've got astronomical alignments, and they have arrangements that are non-domestic. They are all function beautifully as memory palaces, as song lines. So the commonality, again, the human brain. We've got Newgrange. I personally believe it's the worst reconstruction I've ever seen. It looks like a 1970s auditorium, but you're welcome to disagree. Again, the astronomical alignments, but right, and decorated stones, and right all around are the stones, and same with Douth and Noath, which as a memory palace is perfect. There's performance space at the front, there's timber circles, you've got the lot. So there's some of the others that probably look more like it is. Up at Cantee in Ireland, you've got these decorations all the way, again, a perfect performance space, and with equinox illuminations, and the wonderful maze how in Orkney, I'm not going to go through them all, but we've got the carved stone balls in Scotland. These objects, some have multiple knobs, most had 6, whether they were decorated or painted. You've had those ones? Actually, I'll keep that one. And skewed to the monuments, work a treat as a memory aid. But my problem was some of them had multiple knobs. And if you can't sequence, it could have been painted. If you can't sequence a memory aid, it's not going to work. But when I examined them in Edinburgh and that, if you hold it at a particular angle, you'll get 4 that line up. All of them can be sequenced. And the curators then said they couldn't stop seeing what I was seeing in that. So they can be sequenced. I've got lots of ways my ideas can be falsified. It hasn't happened yet. That doesn't mean it won't start now. Talking about sand talk, I'm not going to go on in detail because I'm going to run out of time. But artworks, we need to stop thinking of art as pretty. Art contains information. It's absolutely critical, restricted, because if it's not restricted, the designs, you will lose the information. That's up in Arnhem Land. I'm not going to try and pronounce anything because I can't. Vast flat ceilings. We're now over in Chauvet in France. Panel of the horses. If you look carefully at it, you'll see that the horses have their ears in different positions. They have their fur different. Every horsey person knows that those ears tell you things. Once you start looking at that artwork in terms of encoding knowledge, things start to jump out at you. Except working with a dyslexic woman who sees space differently to me, she saw so many things, even in the photos, that I didn't, and a lot of abstract. We always get the pretty stuff that resonates with us. Abstract art can be used in more complex ways. Howard Morphy is the expert on that, Morphy. So in China, you've got the big rock art panels, and in Utah, so we've got 72 kilometres in 9 Mile Island, 72 kilometres in a row. That is a memory board. That is a blackboard. It is a university. You've got that all over the world. So the reason I'm learning Chinese is it's the only culture we can start with the rock art and we can go right through to a script still taught today and see the whole evolution. And they went to scrolls. So the book 1,000 Years of Manga, they went to the scrolls with the Japanese, copied Hokusai coined manga. You've got a complete continuum on the way. And in Indonesia, you'll know lots of wonderful art. This is my big field of research at the moment. In the latest book, I have argued that you are all genetically encoded to use music, art, story, and your connection to physical space to store vast amounts of knowledge. These skills are ancient. They're innate. They are biologically in you. They are universal. Every single culture on the planet shows the same thing, including all the neurodiversities and so on. uniquely human. No other species does this, and so incredible that evolution encoded it in us. So, including who also have the same genetic mutation that I talk about there. It's not a single gene theory. There's no such thing. Neanderthals with their art, and even with the memory palace. 400 stalagmites carefully lined. This is Neanderthal. They're my books. Now I want you to go around the room and see how you go on 8 countries. No, because that'll interrupt everyone else. That's just your starting point, except I advise if you want to do that, you do it somewhere that's more useful to you than this room. So let's stay with Neanderthals. See, I've got 2 minutes. Are there any questions? Right. Do you want to explain from a Pueblo? Then within the culture, certainly here, more and more is revealed as you are ready to receive it. So at the very highest level, so there's research, a couple of places in the world, on the very highest level are things like what you do in extremes of drought, trade agreements. There's all sorts of things that are held really restricted because the survival is dependent on it. It might be something that an event that hasn't happened for 100, 200 years. You will survive if you eat that berry. You won't like it, but don't eat that one, whatever you do. So if you think about cycads here, they are a deadly plant, but they're used for ceremony because they're prepared in certain ways. I don't like to think about how they work that out, but that information has to be kept awfully accurate or you're going to wipe out the whole population. So you don't keep it, you keep it within the culture as you're describing, but then again, if it's really, really critical, higher up, and then you have the system so that nobody can control it. Do you want to explain that? Yeah. Pueblo astronomy was some of the most revealing for me. All right.
Because if you share this secret sauce to other people, they will say, you know,
But it'll also become corrupted. And that corruption you can't afford. So you've got Blombos Cave, you've got places where colours of ochre, there are recipes for them. They require heating up to this and then doing the, I mean, if you get that wrong, it doesn't work. So you don't have every kid learning that recipe. You keep that at a higher level. somewhere in the initiation level in order to ensure it. So public and restricted performance spaces are absolutely, and restricted knowledge, absolutely critical, which I hope I'm right in saying it's an issue, a big issue now.
I do remember reading at the Boxing Day tsunami in 2004 that there were groups who had gone out to the Andaman Islands because the whole area had been ravaged by the tsunamis. And most of those communities down there are indigenous communities, but with the exception of a couple that are quite famous now, one of them had been hit by missionaries and been Christianized. But they, scientists, whoever it was, went out there expecting that these indigenous communities would have been wiped out by the tsunami because they had no prior warning. And as it turns out, most of the islands had survived just fine because they knew that even though it hadn't happened in generations, that knowledge had been passed down, telling them about if the ocean would recede really quickly, they needed to get to high ground because these massive waves would come in and eat them. The one island that suffered heavy damage was the one that had been Christianized, the traditions wiped out or repressed. So it's one of those examples of intergenerational significant natural devastating events that hadn't happened in any kind of living memories, and nobody there experienced it in their life. The knowledge of it had been passed down in such a way that they knew that information, were able to utilize it immediately.
And that information was stored. Firstly, as an old person, can I say respect for the elders? Really useful stuff. But you've got, say, at Stonehenge, you've got bones that were of animal bones and things that were buried 70 years after in the walls, 70 years after they were first curated, and some 400 years after they were first curated, buried. You've got fox bones at one level, and 100 years later, fox bones buried again or into the wall. So you've got you can start analysing that particular section was used for this particular sort of knowledge. And so if you use the lens of Indigenous knowledge methods and technologies, you don't need to know the content and you've got no right to ask for it. But those technologies are human, invaluable, and we can only learn them now from our Indigenous colleagues.
Thanks, Lynn. Can we give